Welcome back to the last session of the PAL conference. If you made it this far, you get a special prize. We got a great panel. We've got Lemma Salama. Did I say it right?
You did.
Okay. I've got it sounded out of my head. So we got Lemma Salama, Valerie Meyers, and Lynette Spencer talking about their experience with nonprofits. Let me set up why we even added this and Lynette's session yesterday to the calendar. I feel like one of the things that I see come up a lot in Facebook forums, as well as people kind of ask me one-on-one when they're just running through their random list of questions to ask a coach, is should I do a nonprofit? And there tends to be a lot of, in my experience, uh, misunderstandings about that or oversimplifications, but at the same time, there's a lot of benefits that they don't understand. So just having three people who have actually done it, who are doing it, who are in the middle of it kind of thing, I think would be valuable. So maybe first, if we could just do a quick 1 minute introduction. So Lemma, Valerie, Lynette, in that order. Tell us who you are and both what your nonprofit experience was, but maybe I'll give you 2 minutes each. How that led into nonprofit, what is your nonprofit, et cetera, and then we'll start peppering you with questions.
Awesome. So my name is Lemma. I'm an LMFT out here in SoCal, and my nonprofit is called Desert Rose Trauma Recovery. I also have another nonprofit called Southern California Brain Spotting Institute that's still growing. I found myself in the nonprofit realm, honestly, when I was an undergrad, and I inherited a nonprofit and kind of had to work on growing it. And doing my transition into the mental health world, I started off at private practice first and then kind of found myself segueing back into the nonprofit realm. I also do the nonprofit practice, which is my consulting branch where I help folks start their nonprofits. So I've worked with a lot of mental health professionals that also started and like grown their nonprofits too. My nonprofit, we are two parts to it. So one is increasing access to mental health. So we provide sliding scale sessions to our community, as well as operate as a practicum site. So we also train the next generation of students. And we're currently working on building up a nutrition branch of our nonprofit right now, and we're looking at grant funding for that. So
And
that's
that's
what's
actually a
going on.
requirement of taking interns in California. You have to be a nonprofit,
You
correct?
have to be a nonprofit
Yeah.
or a
Okay.
non-exempt setting.
Non. Yeah. Okay, Valerie, tell us about you and your nonprofit.
I'm Valerie Meyers, Bitz. I'm from Bismarck, North Dakota. I have two nonprofits. One is 5 years old called the Roundtable Children's Mental Health Association. Started it because of, getting scholarship monies back to families for mental health services, filling that gap in our state. We're a rural state, limited services uh, or limited quality services and being able to get that done. So started that last year. I started first responder recovery. Um, I was doing the services for first responder recovery in my private practice, group private practice, the Kids Therapy Center. And about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, friend of mine and I who thought we needed better quality services, first responders were like, we should turn this into a nonprofit because I had all these people wanting to donate money to it, right? And and that was it. The money goes back to first responders, it goes back to quality of care. It's a holistic type agency. We're in the process of building a clinic for it and all this other stuff. So it was a good move to switch that to a nonprofit and be able to do the services that we do there.
Awesome. Lynette?
Great. Thank you. My name is Lynette Spencer, and I'm a founder of a nonprofit. 2010 was my first experience with nonprofits. It was my original plan was to do a group private practice, which was going to be experiential in nature. And at the time, I was teaching a class in experiential therapies at Aurora University in Illinois, and pushback from my students told me that the children they were going to be working with, MSW students, the children they were going to be working with were not going to be able to afford what I was teaching them.
Hmm.
And so I turned to my community and found out that our local community mental health board, our county community mental health board, had just completed a needs assessment that showed that there was a deficit of mental health services for adolescents. And so I decided to open my group private practice plan as a nonprofit, and started AdventureWorks, which is an outdoor behavioral health care adventure therapy organization. For at the time, it was for 11 to 17-year-olds, and we currently serve 3 to 18-year-olds in DeKalb, Illinois, DeKalb County. I also serve as the fractional executive director for a similar program in Portland, Oregon, called the Parker Bounce Johnson Foundation, which is was originally started as a legacy organization for for a family who lost their son to suicide. And they were similar to what you were saying, Valerie. They were a startup nonprofit to fund mental health treatment, and decided to start providing services themselves. And they brought me in to start a program that's very similar to what we do at AdventureWorks. And so I'm just a fractional, very part-time executive director there as well.
Love it. So, the overarching title of this workshop has to do with how nonprofit might increase accessibility to the public and things like that. So maybe if you could touch on that first. I think some of you alluded to it. How does this create access different than starting a solo or group practice? In other words, if somebody's very mission driven in their objectives in this field, they want to reach as many people as possible. Why should they consider a nonprofit from an access point of view? Maybe just go in that same order. Lemma, Valerie, Lynette.
Okay. I think a big part is like a nonprofit is a community organization, right? So your structure itself begins that way. I think a big part of how it was able to increase access for us was we were able to apply for a lot of grant funding and receive a lot of funding from the community, which allowed us to basically offer sliding scale fees, right? Another part is operating as a practicum training site. We have the students who are able to give the services. And because the students are in that phase where they're more excited, they're ready for it, they're giving that kind of quality care. What was the second part of the question?
Just accessibility. I mean, that was great. Valerie, what about you?
Um, for me, it started when it was actually, I got a phone call from a mom who just left the ER and they couldn't afford services. And I was tired of hearing that, right? We can't be, obviously, we can't be giving away our services all the time because of we got to pay our staff and the overhead. But it was in our area, it's like you see nonprofits for kids, because primarily kids is my specialty, right? It for like if they're on the autism spectrum, they get these fun, they have the waiver and these types of certain monies that they access. But if they have ADHD or anxiety or depression, they don't, right? For services. And so then that's kind of where it started. And our state restructured their human service centers 4 or 5 years ago, where the child had to have a dual diagnosis and they really limited who could come there anymore. And that's then when I was like, okay, this is enough. Um, it's super fun because, yep, I get donations that go right back to the kids. And my private practice, the kids therapy center is not the only one who benefits from that. It's any kid or any counselor or kid counselor for that program in the agency can apply to be on our in part of our group practice that they can get monies for these kids back to them, right? So the really fun part about it is like I so we do a lot of outlying communities too. And so a community about an hour away, they called, and I have counselors in their school system, but they had a kid who really needed services, but no finances to help pay for services. And so we then call a company in town and we're like, will you sponsor a kid, right? Here's the amount that we need for till the end of the school year. Was able to get that money. They donated it back to the round table, and that child's now getting services, so it's really very rewarding in those types of ways that you can really help in those immediate needs.
So one of the things that I'm hearing there too, right, is your traditional for-profit practices, maybe out of fear or sense of scarcity or whatever, there's barriers to collaboration there. The nonprofit actually acts in some ways, and probably most of us, if we think about our practices, the nonprofits in our community are kind of these safe hubs that all of us competing practices want to see succeed, in part because of folks we can't meet. You also said something in there that resonated with me, Valerie, which is any of us running these group practices feel caught between. I mean, I feel like I've had this discussion this week in my own practice. Why are we charging this client for this? And my answer is because you want to get paid, right? Like there's this gap there that everything right in the hearts of clinicians wants to make sure there's access there, but they also need to pay their own family's way. So, what about you, Lynette? How have you seen this increase accessibility versus being a for-profit entity?
Well, I think I'll just sort of repackage what I heard the others say, and that is that it a nonprofit isn't owned. It's essentially a gift that is given to the community. It's community owned and stewarded, and it the intention is that it offers a solution to a community problem. And donors, grant funding agencies, whether it's tax dollars that are being allocated to the grants that are funding the agency, or private donors or corporations that are funding the need that you've identified that your agency addresses, they're allocating that money because there's a problem that you're solving. And we like to think of it, social workers like to think of it as being that we're doing good. But the reality is that we've identified a problem and we're solving a problem. We're reducing recidivism in the courts, or we're providing the access. We're providing access, but what is the problem that access and the ability to pay for that access is actually reducing? And so that's sort of how I look at it. And I didn't look at it in the beginning that way, but I look at it that way now. Like, what is in it? And I think if we look at it in terms of what is the problem we're solving, that actually helps our grant writing. And it helps us get more funding, because then we can actually say what the dollars are going toward and what the outcomes are going to be in an easier way or a more direct way than making it just seem like it's a nice service that we're
I feel like a
providing.
lot of nonprofits are much more of a story brand, if you will. Like, I mean, there's a story behind it. There was a need that arose, and that caused heartache for somebody, and people came together. We'll go in reverse order this time. Maybe Lynette, Valerie, Lemma. One of the things I kind of uh, raise my eyebrows at, sometimes maybe chuckle under my breath, is when somebody says, "Well, I'm thinking about owning a nonprofit." Like organizationally, operationally, ownership wise, these are very different entities. Setting up your practice as a nonprofit, like what were the buckets of ice cold water for you in autonomy and governance and other people poking their nose into your business with a nonprofit versus a solo practice? Lynette?
Well, I think the biggest one is that you do not own the
Mhm.
ideas. You don't own the practice. You can't sell it. You can't profit off of it. Um, it's in the name nonprofit, but truly there is no profit distribution in the nonprofit, and the board of directors is the governing body, and it's an essential component. You have to have a governing board of directors, and they essentially, even though it's if as a founder, even though it is your baby, this volunteer board of directors who is not involved in the day-to-day running or operations, and really essentially may not, depending on how good of a job you do communicating what the mission is and what you're doing, they may not really truly understand what the organization is. There's a big spectrum of understanding. They are essentially your boss, and they can decide if you are the right person for the job at any
Some
point.
of them on an armchair weekend warrior status, right? Like I come to a board meeting once a quarter and we're telling you how to do what you do every day, kind of thing. I mean, they're
Can be, yeah.
Theoretically, I mean, am I wrong that you could start a nonprofit today, put a board in place, and 3 months from now they could say, actually, we don't need you anymore. You're fired.
Theoretically, that is true. That is absolutely true.
Mhm.
There are structures. The board of directors in or the organization that I work with in Oregon, state of Oregon, has a stewardship. Their articles of incorporation are set up differently so that there's a stewardship board in addition to the board of directors, which
Mm.
protects the founders
Mm.
in a different way. So there are different ways
State
in,
by state.
but it's state
Yeah.
by state. Mhm.
Valerie, what about you? Any surprising moments as far as your own autonomy, control, self-determination in running a nonprofit?
Um, I mean, not surprises to me because I've worked with a variety of nonprofits, but I think it's very common for me to hear from people that am I making a huge profit off of this nonprofit, right? How am I
Mm.
writing in a lot of things to this nonprofit or even like if I so in my both of my nonprofits, I do volunteer work for the nonprofit, right? So I have a board and then the staff goes to the non or as part of the nonprofit, but my role in it is I don't take I don't take any money from either of my nonprofits. And I think it could I mean in bylaws and stuff we can't, right? We can't make a profit off of our nonprofit. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people when they say, "Oh, I want to open a nonprofit too because I'm so good at these things." Well, that's great, but you have to it's your mission to give back in these ways. It's not that you're like my group practice, like Lynette talked about. Yeah, I make a profit, right? Because it's my group, it's a for-profit agency. That does not happen in my nonprofits that I am both of them I'm president of, right? It's like it's really the mission to give back to the community and all of that.
I think one of
Um,
the misunderstandings I see, or maybe the optimistic uh, nascent views, starting places is, well, I'll just start a nonprofit and then I can get funding that I can funnel into my for-profit to, like it's essentially one more step, but still I'll, and in general, there's self-dealing rules, that there's open access type rules. I mean, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't use these as essentially a funding mechanism for your own for-profit where you're making an unlimited amount of money potentially, right? So,
right, right. So correct. So when I open the round table, because it is monies for children's mental health, I mean, it is for the state of North Dakota, right? So we see, I mean, a lot of the therapists on there, because I'm located in Bismarck, is from the Bismarck, probably 200-mile radius around it, right? Who have had to use them. So I talk about it at all the school programs and all of that kind of stuff that I'm a part of, just so that other therapists have access to it. It can't be limited to just kids therapy centers receiving these monies from the roundtable.
Lemma, any thoughts?
I have a couple of thoughts. So, very similar to what Valerie and Lynette said, the idea of the board, right? And the board kind of having a say. In California, we do have it where you can have founder protections in your bylaws, so the founder cannot be removed.
Hmm.
And then having the board, I think there's a fear of, oh, the board's going to tell us what to do. Oh, the board has all this power. And you can decide how much not influence, how much I guess the board is involved, right? Also, the purpose of a board is not necessarily to tell you what to do, but also to share and talk about your mission to the community, right? They're your
Hmm.
biggest cheerleaders. They're out there making the relationships, making the connections, helping you get the funding. So your board is more of your team, and they're people that want to support you, not want to dictate you. Um, so there's that part about the board. Regarding the nonprofit, right? A lot of people think a nonprofit. Is you don't make a profit. And that's true. Is your goal is not to make a profit. It is mission driven. However, it's not that you don't want to make money. You still do need to make money, and there is an opportunity to make that money, right? So with grants, with donations, you can still bill insurance, right? You can do a sliding scale. You can still do some full fee clients. So it's not that you have to be zero at the end.
Mm.
You can still have money, it just gets redistributed it back into the nonprofit. It
Mhm.
doesn't get paid out in taxes. And that's really the big difference. Because if you look at major hospitals, you look at Kaiser, for example, they're all nonprofits. They're all
Mhm.
making millions of dollars, right? Their CEOs are making millions.
Yeah.
Their goal, though, is still mission driven. So you can still make money, is what I want to kind of put out there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
it's just
Oh, good.
the only difference is that there's no profit distribution
Yeah.
among board of
Mhm.
directors or there's no owner. But there is reinvestment back into the nonprofit, into the programs, into the facilities. There's also building up of reserves. So you don't want to end up at zero or negative. You want to make a profit. It's just
Mhm.
not called a profit in the
Yeah.
nonprofit.
So there's actually a term there. You all three may have run across it, but it's called inurement, INUREMENT, and it's essentially the redirecting of the profits of a nonprofit to the like we had a great year, I get a bonus, that kind of thing. That's where it's now. Again, I was thinking of Children's Hospital here in Little Rock, Wade. The CEO of that makes $1 million+. But that is the going rate for a CEO of a hospital system in our area. So it's not that people can't make a good living or an appropriate living, but that ability to fluctuate your earnings based on how great of a year it is not really there. So let me start back with Lynette. From a funding source point of view, what does it look like to get money from other entities? Is it as simple as filling out an application? Is it a competitive process? Is it, you know, dog and pony shows? I mean, what goes into getting money from outside sources?
Pretty much all of the above. So the nonprofit has both if you have a fee for service model within your nonprofit, you have an earned revenue model and an unearned revenue model, as opposed to private practice just has the earned revenue. And so that might come from individual donors, corporate sponsorships, found private foundations, public grant entities, um, local, county, federal, state grants. So there's a wide spread of public monies and private foundation money and private individual donors that you can access. And a simple search online will, net you a list of grants that you can apply for. And there's all kinds of qualifications that you have to meet and essentially following the recipe to apply. The dog and pony show is with the more local ones, and that's probably a bad term. It's a lot of networking and making sure that people know you and understand your organization. It's just a different aspect of marketing.
Yeah.
So we do social media to target our client populations that we want in our practice for our private practice, but for nonprofits, we have to do that. Plus, we have to do for grant organizations, we have to target for donors, donor development. We have to target for lots of different groups to understand what we do because we want to serve the people and we want them to come to us. And then we want to serve the people who are paying for the service and helping offset costs associated with the services that people can afford.
Valerie,
Can you
how
repeat the
how hard or
question?
easy? Yeah, how hard or easy has it been to raise money? Has it been different than what you expected? About what you expected?
I mean, I guess for me, about what I expected, just because I'm familiar with
Mhm.
nonprofits, right? But like Lynette said, you have a variety of ways that income can come in, and it is a lot of networking. Um, I think that and we'll probably talk next about the benefits of a nonprofit, and that's some of what this is when I have people coming to me to say, I want to give this chunk of money specifically for this mission, and then I might have that mission in my nonprofit or know somebody that does, and it's really nice to have that extra income going back right to that. Um, but it is a lot of networking. Um, and that like Lynette said, you basically have the profit that comes in from the patients that we see or the services that we provide in that area. And then we have that other monies that come in from grants, sponsorships, donations, whatever it is. Yeah, fundraising.
Lemma, and Valerie and Lynette, you can jump on this one. I think one of the things I've also heard people fantasize about with nonprofits is I just don't want to deal with insurance companies, all their requests for data, the monitoring, the recoupments. Is this fundraising and somebody gives you $100,000 or whatever? Is it an accountability free process? Do they want data on outcomes? Do you have to report back to them? Lemma?
Oh, 100%, right? So every grant they do require certain reports, certain income reports, and depending on how big the grant is and who's giving you the grant, it'll depend. So I've gotten grants for like 30,000 where they're like, here you go. It's the end of the year, we just have to get rid of the money, and they didn't really ask for anything. And I've gotten grants that were like 10,000 and they wanted so much paperwork, right? The difference being where's the funding coming from, right? So
Mhm.
foundations giving you grants versus corporations versus like your local Walmart. So it depends who it is, right? I think the most from my experience is like state and federal will have like the strictest, like they want the most data, the most paperwork, which is one of the reasons we really haven't dabbled in there. But yeah, one thing I wanted to add in regards to grants and donations though is most folks don't talk about in-kind donations, which are
Mm,
free things that you get, right? So Google Workspace, for example, is free for nonprofits. So all of that, Google also gives like Google like $10,000 in Google Ads per month for nonprofits. So a lot of the discounts and in-kind donations that you can get from corporations also adds into the help that we get.
yeah, one of the big, huge nonprofits here in Springfield, Missouri, Convoy of Hope, I think it is, but they raise $500 million a year, but it's in donated groceries, right? They basically load up semis with stuff that's coming off the shelves at places. So their actual working budget is very small, even though they report huge donation amounts, right? So, okay.
Going back to
Uh,
one of
yeah.
going back to one of the cold buckets of water, we have to pay workers' comp premiums on our volunteers. So even though
What?
we don't pay them, we have to assess a minimum wage rate for every volunteer hour.
Wow. So
Mhm.
a nonprofit with a small budget, but you have a ton of volunteers, could actually have a huge workers' comp bill
Yeah.
because a bunch of people come out and do this for free.
Yeah.
Graduate interns working at your nonprofit, seeing people for free, you're going to need to cover with workers' comp.
Yeah.
That's wild. Okay. Still, nonprofits, any of you can chime in on this, still subject to lawsuits, still subject to labor complaints, all that kind of stuff. Still fair game.
Mhm.
All of the
Yeah.
above, yeah, fair
Yeah.
game. One thing
Yeah.
we typically get, sorry, the director and officer insurance to
Mm,
protect the board of directors. So there's additional insurance that we also do cover or do hold.
yeah.
Mhm.
How easy was the paperwork? What was the timeline and cost to get your nonprofit started? Is it, you fill it out on a weekend when you got nothing else to do, or is it more complex than that?
So mine was that experience. It was like less than a day, and we got it within 90 days.
Wow.
Valerie, Lynette?
Ours was, I sat on mine for a little while. I sort of perseverated over it. And when I did have an attorney look it over, and I had somebody who had just submitted theirs and had some trouble with it, look it over, tell me what her hangups were. Ours was we had to work out 3 years of budget for the nonprofit before we even had a budget. So that tripped me up a little bit. So it's basically like a business plan. And then when I finally submitted it, it was a 2 month turnaround. But that was back in 2010. So I don't know what the timeline is now. I'm curious.
Valerie?
Okay, so I have two very different stories because I have two nonprofits, right? So my first one, the Roundtable, it took us 18 months to get our IRS thing back. Um, and it was like, okay, so think about it, it was 5 years ago, so it was just after COVID. Uh, got everything submitted. I did the long form that time, right? So if you expect more than 50,000, you do the long form. Did that time. And the IRS, like, I had an attorney look at it, all the things, and the IRS lady called, one of them called one day and is like, okay, you need to have this right here, right? And it was like a one sentence verbiage, whatever, right? So I was like, okay, great. We did it, submitted it, and then uh And then it was probably 2 or 3 months after that we got it. But in total, with the IRS had it for 18 months, right? The first responder program, I did the 50,000 or less, 1 page easy application, and I had my nonprofit stuff from the IRS within 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
So I usually tell people that ask me that to do the easy one unless you already know you have some larger donations coming in, right?
Mm.
But most people, I mean, from obviously we have some really great nonprofits out there, but most people, when first starting a nonprofit, that first year is really trying to learn the systems of running a nonprofit and getting theirs stabilized.
Mm.
That if they make 50,000, great, great, right? But yeah, it's
Just getting it up and running.
yeah, yeah.
From a board point of view, I'm curious because people will probably want to know how many people are on your board? How many of them are friends and family and people that have your back by design? What's your board composition look like? And how often do you guys meet?
Illinois requires 3 people minimum. Our bylaws right now say 4 to 12, and we have 6 currently, which is a little light for my liking. I like 8 to 10, and we meet monthly.
Hmm. Okay. Lemma?
So my board's pretty small. It's three of us, and two of them are close, like colleagues of mine, who've majored in different things, so kind of bring different experience to it. And I prefer to kind of keep it small.
And how often do you guys meet?
We meet, so we have to do at least once a year for compliance. So we'll do the official once a year and then on an as-needed basis.
Okay. Valerie?
For the roundtable, I have 5. And first responders, it's 3, but we have committees, fundraiser. We have some committees on the fine or for the first responders. Both of them we meet quarterly, but we do up them. So like right now we have an Easter egg hunt for the roundtable. So now from now through the beginning of April, we meet, if it's not every week, every other week. The first responder one, we are meeting monthly because we are working on a building in that project.
Mm-hmm.
So we are meeting more often. Both of those, I'm trying to think so the roundtable does have my mother-in-law on it because she has like 40 years of experience of running nonprofits. Right. So, but all of them basically in the fields that we're in, like, so my roundtable, it's the lieutenant of the local PD, the supervisor of child protections on that one, on the first responder one. So you can see I kept them to the groups that these are some lead people in that area for our community.
Yeah, board composition is a whole strategy by itself, right? You probably have on one hand people that have your back or they're close colleagues or whatever, and they support this because they support you. And then you have people who are very passionate about what they're supporting, and you're less important to them than the cause, right? Those ones, in my experience, maybe are there's even a fundraising strategy, right? Like I've been on boards before where they say that while we don't have a requirement, we really like to see every board member raise at least $10,000 a year. Wink, wink. That means you write a check if you don't fill up tables at the banquet or whatever. So,
Yeah,
um,
a lot of
go
boards
ahead.
have a raise it or give it policy for
Yeah,
their in their board agreements. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so how does your nonprofit interact with your for-profit for any of you that have both? What does the overlap actually look like?
There's no overlap for us.
Okay.
So we have some overlap, especially when we were first starting out. And we had a couple shared service agreements where we would share like clinical admin stuff, we would share office space, we would share clinical supervisors for a little bit. So that was kind of the main way. In some cases, sometimes we would get access to specific software that could hold two separate organizations. So we would like share the service or share the product because it'd be too pricey to duplicate and purchase it like for both.
Mm,
So a lot of that stuff.
gotcha.
For me, I feel like my for-profit agency gives back to the nonprofit more and more. Um, and my board is really good about like, no, kids therapy is not paying for that, right? Um, we do have, I mean, everything is split, different QuickBooks, checkings accounts, all the things, right? And so when my management team or billing, whatever, HR, whoever it is, gets something, they do have a documentation to make sure it goes back to that nonprofit so that we pay for at least that staff time that went into that to take care of that. Um, as they're growing, yep, they will have their own, but it is some of that shared staff time, I feel like. Uh, yeah, there's when it comes to grants or donations from like bigger agencies, sometimes people will hear about me through a nonprofit, but then tell me, I actually want you to take this money for your for-profit agency and use it to train your staff, right? We're not going to run it through the nonprofit or whatever, and whatever is up to them. And so sometimes, I mean, so it's a benefit to my for-profit agency too, as we get some of those. Uh, was it last year that we did? We got a $180,000 grant from the state for they wanted to deliver it through my for-profit agency. Um, and so I did, you still have to, it's like a grant, you still have to back submit all the things, the paperwork, the receipts, all the kind of stuff that you would. But it was very much a bonus, for the for-profit agency, and it all went to training for the staff. So, yeah, so I mean, it has benefited in that way as well, right? So,
Lemma, Lynette, either of you have were there any learning curves there on documentation? I mean, people are part of why people become 501(c)(3)s is, we want people to be able to donate and it's deductible. Like, what kind of record keeping requirement is there? Do you have to report donations to the IRS? How does all that stuff work?
Yeah, I mean it's essentially the same as in any business. You have to keep records for everything, and this might feed into Kevin's question in the chat about taxes. All donations are accounted for in your tax return and in your audit. Anytime in the state of Illinois, if you have over $500,000 of revenue in any one year, you have to do an audit. Anything less than that, you have to do a review, which is about 75% of the cost of an audit, almost as extensive. It's not really much different from what I can tell. And that accounts for any whatever your fundraising event revenue was, whatever your individual donor, it breaks out all the different charitable donations that you get from whatever source. And it tracks what you spent, if you spent any money on a professional fundraiser. And in fact, if you do spend money on a professional fundraiser, you don't qualify for review. You have to have a full audit. There's just different, guidelines around that. And then all of your data, all of your tax returns are public. They're posted publicly on GuideStar, which is the most common place to find them. Some organizations post them on their websites. Anything you wanted to know about the highest paid employees in the organization, to the dollar amount of donations, anything that you get is all public on the IRS 990 forms and the state 990 forms that are submitted. We just don't pay income taxes, but it's all posted online.
I think that transparency is a big thing for if any of you are new to this, right? So the Form 990 it's like the equivalent of our 1040 or something, when you fill out your tax return. You can see what the executive director makes. We can go pull up and see what Lynette makes, right? You can see who's on the board. You can see who gets some of the biggest subcontracts of some of that stuff. Like the level of scrutiny, would you all say the level of scrutiny on this is more than what you experience in for-profit? It's probably
Oh,
fair.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is more, did you say?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's open it up to Q&A. I've grilled them. What else do you all want to know about the nonprofit experience? And or Wade, do you see any comments, or questions in the chat?
Think there was one question around just like the best way to get started, like books to read, checklist, which thankfully posted something, which thank you for that.
Don't have a book, but I would say some of the best things I did when I started is I went to coffee with a few other agencies, founders or whatever in my community, and just really picked their brain of the ins and outs, things they would do different, things that they really liked, and I really got some great feedback. So like for in a nonprofit world, counselors can come work there, and in 10 years their student loans can get reimbursed. And so those are some of the things, but 10 years can be a long time. So like this next legislative session, I'm actually going and asking for 4 years from our state, right? So that so I'm going to ask for state monies to help with student loan reimbursement for some of my staff. And uh so it's just learning from others that are doing it, right? I was like, I don't know. I'm very type B, right? I'm not going to sit and have everything laid out. I'm just going to go for, yeah, I'm going to educate myself and then just go for it, right? Like, yeah.
Well, I think
But
that coffee with other founders is important because even as hearing you three talk, it's so different state to state, right? There
Mhm.
really are different things. So you can read the best book ever, but it just might flat out be different in California than North Dakota or whatever. I have, by the way, seen, and I don't know that it's ever panned out, people get really hopeful of, I'll just start a nonprofit and I'll get my student loans forgiven through that. And aside from the fact that I think there's probably some self-dealing issues with that and arm's length, it may not be worth the trouble of having to
right.
go through the audit, have a board, like just work some extra hours and pay off your student loans. So
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my thought too. But like when you get into some of that, the amount of patients that they still have to see for a nonprofit, they have rules to it. It's not just working for a nonprofit. I think the amount of patients they have to see still and the hours per week, right? So they have to be a full-time staff or they have to be working 40 hours a week. And, you still have these things
mm,
that they have to meet. And people, I'm like, it would be better for you to work this way, like you said, and work a few more hours so we can pay off your student loans, right? But uh, yeah,
tell me about partnerships, and I'm thinking of you, Lemma, but then Lynette and Valerie may have contributions here too. You told me you actually have had some success identifying other organizations that have gotten grants for mental health and then have no idea how to staff them. And that's part of how you kind of piggyback without directly fundraising yourself or whatever. Can you unpack that a little more for me?
Definitely. I'm not a big fan of fundraising, so I will avoid it if I have to. So one thing we would do is partnership. So where we're located up here, we had organizations like a domestic violence shelter, inpatient rehab, wellness center, and mental health was not a component of it. So they would come to us, and essentially what we did is we would kind of like plug in our nonprofit as their mental health department. So we would be running everything, we would take care of everything, we would work alongside them, and then they would reimburse us for that service. So it was a way for us to kind of have that partnership where we got grant funding and we didn't really have to fundraise or like apply for it. I would provide the reports that they would need. And I've done that for a couple different organizations, and I've helped other organizations do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other partnership ideas, ways you've partnered your nonprofit with other entities?
We've done collaborative programming, not a lot of formal partnerships, but we have done collaborative programming, and we're in my Illinois nonprofit partners in a citywide collaborative for one of our needs-based neighborhoods in DeKalb, and that's really a very cool citywide partnership that we belong to. So um, just good resource sharing, I think, is the key to good nonprofit collaboration. And I think just going back to what Valerie said about sitting down with people ahead of time when you're considering a nonprofit or launching into whether you start an organization, I think the other thing to do is to share your idea and to see if anyone else is doing it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Because certainly not all ideas need to become an organization. And your idea, there's something that maybe we haven't touched on is the idea of getting a fiscal sponsor. So like launching your idea under the umbrella of an already existing nonprofit can provide the benefits of what's called a fiscal sponsorship, where the nonprofit function, you can function as a nonprofit in a programmatic way under the umbrella of an existing nonprofit and still get all the benefits of receiving grants and fundraising and things like that.
Love it.
My first responder program, we are working with other stations, PD fire stations, so they get access to, it seems like the police department gets quite a few mental health grants for them, and then we're that agency that we co with them to make sure that the wellness program is, we'll be getting those into their stations appropriately, staff time in their stations, stuff like that. So that one's really nice because they have so much more access to some grants than we do. And but then we can help staff them uh appropriately and stuff. So there is some fun collaborations
What
that
about this one? I hadn't even thought to ask it until just now. Something you said made me think of it, Valerie. But is the clinician experience for you as a leader, a boss, different in the not? Does it attract a different kind of clinician? Are the expectations different? Is the retention different when you're working with clinicians that say, I want to work at a nonprofit?
So for my first responder program, I'm actually really fussy who works with us. And the purpose of the program was to bring quality clinical care to our first responders and not just somebody who took an hour video on first responders and whatever, so but for that, as the board and I had to decide that we pay our staff then in that program very well.
Mm.
So these are not new entry counselors. I would not take them on if, well, I mean, of course, I have some that are, I think, 5 years out from grad school, yeah, I mean, so they do get paid well. They got good benefit package. They have this specialized training, and that part of our fundraising or some of the grants that we've gotten, or some people have sponsored certain trainings for my staff in that or the first responder staff in that program. I would say in general, yeah, that I hear of nonprofits pay on the lower end or whatever, like your average agency might, maybe even, and then they will get that probably quality of care. But for that program, we do not. We have high expectations for those therapists that work that program, but they get paid well. Um,
Lynette, Lemma, same experience with clinicians that you've had in for-profit, different?
So I
I
Same
think it's
struggles to get them to sign their notes on time? I mean, tell us about the difference, or if there is none.
Go ahead, Lemma. You were about to say something.
I was gonna say it's pretty much the same, I feel. I think what's different for us is because we are a trainee site, we only hire those who were an intern with us. So we do have a year-long experience with them. We really get to see them. And then how our practicum site is structured, I really attract a certain type of student that really comes to us. So we kind of start the process early as a pipeline. And then once they're finished, if, we like them, we feel like they work, we do kind of keep them with us or they go to the private practice, either one. But no, same problems, same difficulty with signing notes sometimes. I feel like that's just a therapist experience. But I feel like they're a lot better because when you do get therapists who are brand new to the field, you are their first trainer, right? So you're really setting that expectation down and you don't get to hear, well, I did this at this other site or I did this at this other job. They're not as strict. So you're really the foundation. And I've noticed that piece is different from hiring people from the outside and versus those that have grown with us.
Lynette?
Yeah. And this, Ken, and I think maybe a couple others too, that there was a before and after. There was I left the organization for a time and came back, and in the previous history, organization paid lower than private practices. And when I came back, I've been working to correct that. And I think historically, because of the lower pay, we had a lot more new grads than and so there's just a difference. There's just a difference in the newer, younger clinician set, and we serve kids, so we do attract a younger set of clinicians because we're a youth serving organization. I think just because of and we're an adventure therapy organization, so we need young, active, energetic people on the team. But I've been actively working to shift the model of compensation so that it does attract the more mature, at least a few years outside of the degree, and we're working toward that. It's not quite there yet. So we do have a younger set, and there's just a different set of challenges with the different levels of licensure and things like that.
Wade just put a CE link in the chat. Wade, any instructions on that as we're pulling in for a landing?
Yeah, just make sure you get that completed for anyone who's watching now, the recording, and then we will pull together all the evals and send them out here in the next week or so.
Lynette, Lemma, Valerie, if there's anything you want to put in the chat, anything like Lemma, I know you got a nonprofit kind of consulting gig. Anything you guys want to put in the chat, contact information, we'll make sure everybody gets it. Feel free to share there. Any other questions? We got them for 4 or 5 more minutes. Anything else that you've been dying to know about the nonprofit experience? You can unmute or put it in the chat.
I got this I just pulled up this old presentation. It's a couple of years old, but there's this slide that shows and I think this might be specific to Illinois, but I'll just show this to you guys about the numbers of nonprofits that are registered in, I think, Illinois at the time of this slide. Oh shoot, I just clicked off of it, but I can pull it back up real quick. Maybe not. Yeah, let me just scroll to the slide. It's a real interesting graphic about the number of nonprofits that exist. And well, my computer's not going to work, but there's a very, very low percentage of nonprofits that actually make $1 of revenue. And here it is. So there are 78,000, over almost 79,000 nonprofits. There's 51,000 that are excluding the revoked and defunct ones, and only 9,000 that make at least $1 in annual revenue.
Wow.
I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, with 1,000 or more annual revenue, there's only 7,500 nonprofits, and only 50 with one employee or more.
What's wild there too is the 28,000 revoked or defunct. I think it, like a lot of things, it shows you how passion projects both bring things into existence but go cold really quick too. And when you're not raising any money and you're still paying for an IRS, Form 990 every year, I mean, tax returns probably cost what, 1,000 to 2,000 a year on a nonprofit. And this, it's interesting. This probably parallels the same stats with businesses in general, right? Like 95% of businesses in the United States will never do more than $500,000 in revenue or have more than a single employee. So something magically is not happening with nonprofits that doesn't happen with for-profits. Like they're equally hard in their own right. I think that's an interesting slide, Lynette, to demystify that nonprofit somehow solves the organizational problems that everybody deals with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well,
good stuff, guys. I really appreciate you, Lemma, Valerie, Lynette. Thanks for letting us pick your brains. You guys are amazing. You're doing amazing work.